Is there any place you guys want
Here, you can, you stay in the door. And I don't know what I feel, so I don't know what they
Yeah, it was about then, you know, he's been kind of, and, which I haven't really heard of it, it's that uncommon.
You're smoking
Georgia said 75. And I mean, like that, I mean, he needs to be able to sell it. But he goes into also, you know, mess with him. I mean, he didn't want, you know.
I remember who I talked to somebody up there for
Down there, to about 18 months, he went from.
Jay, yeah.
Okay.
I think we
It sounded like you had a day for sure.
Fun time.
Yeah.
Do we have everybody here that's supposed to be here?
We're expecting Kendra as the only one.
Okay. Wait just a minute, I've got a little bit before 9 anyway. Is that right?
fully live? Yeah, you scared me.
Start, yeah.
I'm Crystal, I work in the finance department.
Al Whitesides, County Commission.
Robert Presley, District 3 County Commissioner.
Welcome, Robert Presley, your first audit committee.
Yes.
And you get like the most exciting meeting of all to start with. 2-4 Finance.
Blair Chamberlain, finance.
Jennifer Durrett in finance.
Andrew Kaufman, I represent, I guess, the business community.
Larry Harrison, my seat is the elected official elsewhere.
And you made that clear.
My name's Danny Alton, CPA.
Terry Orange, internal auditor.
Michael Fruit, County Legal.
Diane Price, budget.
All right, we're around the room then. We had some minutes from our last meeting, which we did have 2 or 3 action items there. And get a chance to look at them. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I moved it with the minutes from last meeting.
Second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? If not, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And now we're going to look at the draft financial statements. Review and discussion.
Alright, we're going to put them up on the screen. We emailed them to you, and then there are a few printed copies around that you guys can share to look at if you'd like. So first, I wanted to. You're just getting started. There's one over there by Al.
And everybody, this is
Be
Kendra.
careful, don't trip.
Kendra is a CPA with Carter and Carter.
Carter PC.
Carter PC.
There are 2 Carters.
And you're,
That's why it's confusing.
that's right. And I have some sense, maybe I made it up, that it was Carter and Carter at one point in time, but maybe not.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's funny, I used to think the same thing. I would say it, and then I forget some board I serve on with, and he's like, no, it's just one Carter.
There you go. Anyway, welcome. Good
Thank
morning.
you very much.
That's all right.
So, for us, it's very hard to believe that we are already wrapping up another year's CAFR. It's blown by. We do have some challenges this year that we haven't had in the past with the implementation of our new ERP system with Workday. So that has really taken up a lot of our time and resources. So we made the decision this year to have Gold Billion actually do the financial statements for us. So we did all the work papers and everything. That process went smoothly. You are getting a little bit of a rougher draft than you normally do at this time of year. And a lot of that is the product of us not being, we're used to doing our own financial statements. So it's been hard to juggle that, which information Gold Killion's working on, which changes we've gotten to them and back and forth. And so that caused a little bit of the inconsistency between the MD&A and the actual statements themselves. But we are aware, we're working that all out, so never fear when it gets published. I feel certain that that will all be presented correctly. With that being said, the audit itself was uneventful this year. We had no findings, no compliance findings, and there is no management letter that will be coming from Gold Killian again this year. So we are excited about that. For the financial results, on the government-wide statements, which are the full accrual statements, exhibits 1 and 2, the county's total net position is $3.2 million this year. It's a decrease of $4.8 million from FY16 as far as net position goes. On the You guys can stop me if you wanna like actually see the
I think that
statements.
question,
Do you want
just
me
sort
to
of the
keep
general lay of the
going?
land question. If you went back to the budget as a budget originally passed and then budget as amended various times throughout the year, was there one or two significant amendments or no? Let's say significant material kind of amendments.
I mean, there's always HHS always has several because they get different governmental
Right.
grants and such
Right.
in there, so they
Yeah.
typically.
And if you look at Exhibit 5, it tells you what the original budget was versus the final budget. And so if I were just to skim through there,
Where is exhibit?
it's on.
There are no page numbers.
There's no
so-
page numbers.
So if you get
Front
to
part or back part?
It says right in the top corner.
Front,
yeah,
Uh,
in the front, actually, let me get it. So
Got
exhibit.
figures numbers and exhibit numbers.
Exhibit
There
5.
you
So
go.
exhibit,
Thank you.
yeah, so exhibit 5, and so we've got it called up on the screen as well. If you go down to exhibit 5, and that's for the general fund, you can scroll down there and see the original budget, which is first column, to the final budget, which is the next column, and you can see if there's any sort of significant differences.
Oh, it's great. It's good. It's good.
And there's really not a whole lot.
Okay.
And then I think otherwise, there would be, if there were some, I'm trying to think of some of the other governmental funds, unless there was a project ordinance that was created.
I mean, always capital projects.
Right.
Pretty wide variation.
So it looks like so it looks like for the year, we're just about, what, $3 million from the original budget to the final budget?
But that's a pretty good thing for this. My point is, this is a good thing for this committee to look at, because the budget is passed, the original budget is your control piece, presumably, and then, you look at it as final, so you got the amendments, there could be a cajillion of them, but then you're looking and you could still have something, because amendments could go back and forth, so you don't,
Right.
You still not need to look at all of them, but but at the same time, I think that's reasonable, a good thing for the committee to kind of have in mind, because that's where we're starting with, really, at the budget.
Yep.
Definitely. So while we're talking about the governmental funds, which are presented on a modified accrual basis, we ended FY17 with a combined fund balance of just over 165 million. Approximately 57% of that was restricted or non-spendable, and that's total governmental funds. The general fund itself, the county's main operating fund, ended with just over 77 million, and 55 million of that was available in the fund. That makes our available fund balance percentage 18.8% for FY17, and the board's policy is that we maintain a minimum of 15% available fund balance percentage.
it's 18%.
Yeah.
It's high.
It's higher, it did increase this year. We had, I think, undistributed earnings about $1 million
Yeah.
extra
Fund
this year.
balance.
18% is, we're still on the lower end of our peer group. I mean, it's high, I think, from where the commissioners have stated they wanted to be, but from 15% to 18%, we're still probably on the low end with
our
the urban counties.
I'm speaking as a taxpayer.
Sure,
now.
yeah, I mean, yep.
Yeah, that's, because the state requires, what, 8%?
The state requires 8%, and 8% is the absolute minimum floor,
I know,
but they compare you to
Yeah,
your,
I know,
Yeah, so-
15% is high, 12 would be, but
yeah.
I won't-
And that might be something the board would want to consider as a
We
policy
will,
change,
we will.
because the policy is 15%.
Yeah.
What, the peer group, is the peer group to 10 largest counties? What is
Usually
that
10
peer
largest
group?
counties is what we look
Yeah,
at.
what do you think the average is in there?
We
if
also
you did?
compared to other AAAs.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah, so it seems like back in May when I looked at it, we were the lowest of the peer group, I think with the exception of Wake County. And I think the highest was, I think, about 22% was where they were at.
Good gracious.
Yeah, so, but it,
And all of them have AAA bond ratings,
not of all the 10, but
and then our peer group,
but in, I think if you looked at our peer group, we were the lowest in our peer group with the AAAs.
Yeah, but of the top 10 in the state, are they all AAAs?
No,
Okay.
no, they're not.
But along those lines, you know, the argument for a healthier fund balance is unknown.
Right, I mean, it's a contingency.
It's a contingency, and so you're looking at a contingency of, let's call it 40 million, 37 unassigned. Is that the number I'm looking for?
55.
55.
55.
55 million.
Yeah.
This is committed, assigned, and
So
unassigned.
it is the committed, it's the unassigned, assigned, and committed. I think
Okay.
is what is the number you're, to
Okay.
get to the available fund balance. So of that
So
available
that's
fund
the
balance.
18, that's the 18%.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
55.
yes.
But then, if 15 of that is assigned, you know, for those non-governmental accounting people, so what does that mean?
Let's see, that is going to the, what's in the notes? It's.
Because if it's generally available assigned, makes it sound like it's not generally available.
Right, so I
Committed,
think,
but even more so.
so the committed is for, I think, some pension liability.
But that'd be fairly much, you could use it. but-
Right, you can use it,
Yeah.
right, we just, it's sort of, that is, it's in that bucket to be spent for that stuff.
Right, and assigned is,
And, let's see, we've got it.
Assigned is the appropriated fund balance amount in FY 18's
Ah,
budget.
that's
gotcha,
right. That's
okay.
it, yeah.
So, but then if you really looked at it, I mean, if I were budgeting and
Right.
thinking what's really available in practical
Right,
terms,
right,
granted that 17 is available, 17 million is available if you had an emergency. You just
Right.
had to,
and usually,
but really what's available is more like the 37.
correct.
The
yes.
practical terms, I understand that.
Right,
That
so
hasn't
that,
already been planned for something else.
and I think though for that assigned, which is the unappropriated fund balance for the budget, I
Right.
think there's always been that challenge by departments to save that amount over the course of the year.
Right.
And not to spend it, and I think traditionally that has been the case, and how we do moving forward is.
Right. Well, it's also sort of helpful, and help me if I'm not thinking about this correctly, I'm just really thinking from Black Mountain, you know, just, that you do a budget, and help me if this isn't right, but you do, when you're pulling your budget together, you have to, I mean, it kind of doesn't work from a practical point of view if you don't utilize some of your fund balance to assign it, because then you'd just be too tight, you'd be down to the penny
I
and.
mean, we always looked at it like you'd be putting an additional burden on the taxpayer if you didn't think you could make up some of that fund balance and you had to put it in as a revenue.
Right, it'd just be kind of it's almost from a practical point of view, you kind of have to start from that place, and then that gives you that is a reasonable position then to think, we probably don't need to spend that, but, you know.
We always
really
challenge ourselves to
can't move
save
forward.
whatever we appropriate by, lapse salaries if there's
Right.
vacant positions or savings. And
Right.
So why is the fund balance appropriated in next year's budget so large this year?
I mean, that was a board decision. We had the Ferry Road land and another property, and they didn't really want to show it as a sale of land buildings, but I think it increased the comfort level. I think the board also has is more comfortable if we did have to spend some, that they're more comfortable lowering that percentage if need be, so.
Because that almost doubled from this year.
Right, I mean,
Sure
it was,
did.
yeah,
We'll
it
be
was,
looking at that, don't worry.
it was
I know you will laugh.
trying to set the tax rate and making sure that it was, fair to the taxpayers, and I think part of that effort was thinking that our fund balance percentage was a little bit higher, in an effort to sort of mitigate that, appropriate more.
But back on the health of the fund balance, though, if you're looking at it from a position of, and granted the 15, I mean, it seems to me just from this discussion, the 15 is committed for the next year budget is a moving target and has lots of reasons why that's there. But I guess the question, it's not really for our committee, but for the commissioners is, what is a healthy fund balance? Because to get it too tight there's some downside to that too, so it's not an easy decision. anyway.
I mean, it's a balance.
Yeah,
That's
it sure is. It sure is. But that's the, I mean, I still think it's worth, you know, considering that the assigned portion is somewhat committed for the budget year. Hopefully it's
Sure.
not needed, but it's committed.
Sure,
That's
yes.
why, that's
You're
why
right, yeah.
it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, thank you.
And what was the percentage for the AAA peer group?
I don't know
Most
if I,
of them are in like around 20%.
with the exception of Wake. I mean, Wake's available fund balance was, I think, just a hair lower than what I mean, we were like 17% last year, and I think they were just right around 17% as well. But most of the other, like Durham, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Durham was.
So your AAA peer group is just North Carolina AAAs?
Right, that's all
Okay.
we did, yeah.
Okay.
And I always have to be reminded of this, if I make sure I understand it correctly. When you're talking 15% or 18%, it is of the current year expenditures?
Yes, well, the operating
And
expenditures.
transfers.
Operating
And
expenditures.
transfers.
Only the operating expenditures.
Yes, yes.
So that, from that perspective, 15%, if you're thinking about contingencies, 15% of your operating budget, that's not a huge number.
I mean, 8% is a month, so
Yeah.
15% is 2 months worth of, so if there were some, catastrophic event, flood, and, we had to keep operations flowing while, and in particular, if something happened, like in December, when most of our tax revenue is coming in, and, I mean, it's really an extraordinary event. But yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Going forward, we'll know the rules we're playing by. We didn't in the past.
Thank you.
So, other news from the year, during the year, we did receive our AAA rating from Moody's, so we were proud of that. There was no new debt issued in FY17. And one other thing to note, we've been working really hard to get a better handle on cash flow and things like that. And you can see some of the results in that by our investment earnings, which increased $400,000 from FY16 to FY17.
And also to note is, if you look on that right there, the total fund balance is 165. So a lot of that was committed. So if you've looked in the last 2 prior years, you will have seen that number come down pretty dramatically because we had issued debt over the last, in the past, and so we had lots of debt proceeds sitting out there for capital projects that we were building. So it's been a very concerted effort to try to spend all that extra cash sitting out there. And one of the concerted efforts we did this year, or over the past 2 years, was really look at what our CIP plan was and what the board has approved, because we have actually approved $72 million worth of capital projects out there. We are trying to not issue debt till we really need to get that money, because every month that we can hold off issuing that debt is another month of debt service payments that we're not having to make. Yeah.
Jennifer, you mentioned investment. There was $400,000 of investment earnings. Is that on the
An
state?
increase of $400,000 over last year.
Increase of $400,000. Is that on the state pension monies? What's that on?
No, we actually have an investment portfolio that we manage and finance, and so the county has an investment policy that tells us what kinds of things we can invest in. So some of that money comes from debt proceeds that are invested in with our trustee bank, and then we actually take the county's, we watch our cash flow all year, we plan it out, we plot it out, we see when we're going to need cash, and we can invest in U.S. Treasuries, agencies, and commercial paper.
Right. So those earnings are up by $400,000 because the pool is up so much. The pool of investable funds.
Because we've made really strong efforts to
We
be more
revised
active
our-
in investment
yeah, we
and
revised
revising
our
our whole
investment.
cash flow
Yeah,
forecast.
$400,000 when you're talking treasuries and short-term investments and so forth. I mean, the pool of investment had to be up because you had this bond money.
It was, so it was up a little bit, but, well.
The bond money isn't included in that,
Right.
it
It's
stays
not,
at the
it's
trustee
not.
bank.
Right.
So,
So-
I mean, that's a tremendous,
so what-
again, what's your yield on it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sort of curious if you,
Gosh, it's not.
yeah.
But our yield is up, because what we've been able to do is, we revised the county policy, I think we can go out a maximum of
3 years.
3 years. So before, we were investing shorter term.
Even shorter.
But
than
because we now have been able to develop a much more sophisticated cash flow model, we know when we're going to have our financial needs. So now when we're investing, we're able to go out and invest all the way out as far as we can. So and we've got monies just maturing right before we need to spend them.
So besides the more efficient management, you probably picked up a couple of points.
Yes, yeah. So the market's been a little bit better as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think our last quarterly report, we are beating the market, and it seems like we were.
Yeah, it's been
trending
pretty
high.
volatile, so our overall yield was just a little bit higher than the market rate.
When you say the market rate, is that a benchmark or what do you?
Yeah,
So
they just
what
use
is your benchmark?
benchmarks.
Do you remember off the top of your head?
There's a couple they use, so it depends on what we're looking at. We
Right.
use the bond equivalent yield for US agencies, and we also use the NCCMT, the accounts at NCCMT to see what they're doing. And they have
Right.
2 different accounts. They have a cash account that can only invest in governmental things now, and then they have a term account.
If you're going out
That's a little
3
bit
years, is that probably 3% or something like that, or 2.5%?
All right now,
That's-
it's more
that's
like
way-
1.8,
Yeah.
getting to around 2 these
Right at
days.
2.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
at 2. So what you probably went to is from almost nothing to around 2% when you started going out
And
long.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. From about, I was excited a couple years ago to get like 0.6.
Yeah. You and everybody else.
Yeah.
You and everybody else.
We're trying to squeeze that juice and turn it. That's what.
So, some other things that we did, some GASB changes took effect this year. So there were 3 GASB pronouncements that we implemented. GASB 80 required the blending of certain component units that were primarily controlled by the governmental agency. So what that meant for us was that the Buncombe County Service Foundation became just a fund in our financial statements and is no longer presented as a component unit. So that wasn't a huge change, just a little difference in presentation. GASB 73 required that our law enforcement officer separation allowance plan be presented as a pension liability this year on our government-wide statements. So that did have a fiscal effect. It resulted this year in a $6.5 million liability on Exhibit 1 that had not been there before, as well as a prior period restatement to establish the beginning liability balance. So that's why you'll see things restated. It was just a GASB pronouncement. And then also GASB 74 took effect this year. It did not have a physical effect, it just affected fiscal effect. I need more coffee.
We know what.
It just was a note disclosure that was required and an extra actuarial valuation that we had to get done on our OPEB plan. So it does disclose the net OPEB liability under the new GASB 74 and 75 standards in the notes. Next year, GASB 75 will be in effect, and we will have to present that liability on the actual Exhibit 1 balance sheet. So that will be a big change for next year.
That's just, it's exhibits 1 and 2, right?
Just the government-wide statements.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the hardest exhibit for anyone to read.
So it will increase our negative net position
Right, and so you will note
by
that,
quite a bit, just to warn you.
so our total net position is negative 25 million, and the reason why it's negative is the fact that we do finance school construction, and so those assets sit on the respective schools' financial statements, so, which always sort of makes it, for me, it sort of makes this statement sort of look weird.
Even where we own the facilities for the school?
Yes.
Because you can't list them twice.
Right.
Right.
So, and we did find out, as far as available fund balance goes, that the average of the largest 10 counties in North Carolina is 25%. This is the FY16 number because everyone hasn't published FY17 yet. 28% is the average statewide. And Wake is our only peer, the only county we consider a peer that's less than 20, they're at 17.7%.
I mean, you say average, that's a small counties too.
So.
That's all.
The statewide average is all
Yeah.
100.
Is 100, but
It's
our,
small.
the peer group is
The 25% is just the largest 10
Mhm.
counties.
I think that's way, way high. I would.
Yeah.
And we can, if you would like us to look, we can look to see what other counties in our peer groups, what their policies are respective to the 15%.
Do. Yeah, let's look.
Yeah, we'll take a
Okay.
look at that. I think
Yeah.
that's we should
Yeah.
see what they have.
Yeah. I'd be curious, yeah, we
Yeah.
need to know that.
Okay.
So that's really our main, I know Kendra noticed, I don't know if the rest of you did, that the CFSA is not in your draft, which is all the grant awards, the federal and state expenditures report. The North Carolina DHHS confirmations were late again this year. They were posted last week.
It's always.
I think you need to change your
Always.
thinking about that. We're gonna be on time.
Well, and so the LGC had actually already extended the deadline for submission to December 15th for this year for all North Carolina governments instead of October 31st, expecting that we were all gonna be waiting for those confirmations. So Gold Killian is working through the CFSA. We've provided the information about local. At this time, it doesn't look like we're gonna have any other programs that need to be tested. We're not completely in the clear yet. They're still working their way through them all.
And we're not expecting the audit to really be finalized. I mean, so I think they're done with most of their field work. We got the draft statements, but I don't think we're actually gonna get the letter probably until everything is complete, which,
Mid-November.
yeah, in November is I think is what we're looking at.
Just because of our discussion on the investments, I would draw everybody's attention, if you hadn't already seen it, a lot of you folks already have, but the number 2, I believe, in the financials, gives a great summary of the investment stuff. It doesn't have pages, but there it is. There it is, Robert. Right there, and it shows. It's sort of interesting. That just goes out to 12 months there.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you had some
But we
going out to
can't-
3 years.
We can go out to 3
You
years.
can, but you haven't.
Right.
Yeah.
We do.
Well, we are.
Well, we're working on it.
Well, so we're building that ladder out.
But this is at 6:30 at the end of
Right.
the last fiscal year. According to this, is there anything out
Right.
more than 3 years?
No, I
Yeah.
haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So good, we're doing that good with that. I thought.
Well, yeah, really.
I thought actually we had gone out to 3 years yet.
Yeah.
We did with the CD, but it's shortened up now. We have a handful of things.
You know, I was interested in the 18 million that the TDA has and so forth. Is that, you know, that seems like a large balance of cash for them to hold,
So,
considering that they receive cash all the time, each year.
well, I think a lot is that a lot of their project money?
12 million of that is already committed
It's
to
committed.
the tourism development project.
It's committed. I got you, just haven't spent it yet. I
Right.
see. So is that about the normal amount they hold about?
I think, it seems like, I was talking with Stephanie last week, and I think she was saying that they were a little high. They didn't have as many projects that
Right,
came in.
yeah, I asked her
Yeah.
that, we were talking.
Yeah.
About that, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I would say that probably is a little bit higher than what they normally have.
Catches the eye, doesn't
Although I think it is probably important to say is they did change their occupancy tax rate this past year, so it probably is even a little bit higher on top of that as well because their revenues were a little bit higher.
What, they were projecting 20 million or something like that? Yeah, this year, it was what, 16 before, or 18?
Is that what they were projecting or is that what we budgeted? Because there's a difference between what we budget and what they project. We budget a little bit higher
Yeah,
just because we want to make sure that we have enough room to, maybe it was 20 that they were projecting.
Sounds right.
And not to get off on the weeds on that, but I heard Stephanie speak over in Black Mountain at a chamber event. And that's an interesting dilemma that you have with the Airbnbs and the high-priced hotel rooms and the push and shove with that, with the room tax revenue.
Yeah.
So,
It's a hot button issue.
it is, it's interesting.
and it's another question too, is what we can do with the money. You know, it's for the beds, you know, butts in the beds, I'd say. But a lot of it, you've got gotta also look at the, infrastructure
Yeah.
and all that, which we can't,
Yeah.
so it's a question.
Right.
Jennifer, can you talk about the pension spiking liability? That was new this year.
Sure, so, on January 1st, 2015, a law went into effect. It was called the Anti-Pension Spiking and Contribution-Based Cap Bill.
You shouldn't want to know.
So basically what it said was that employees hired before, it was the state's way of attempting to hold the counties who were paying their employees really high salaries at the end, but they weren't getting paid that long enough to contribute in enough to cover, and so they were ending up with a shortfall when they were getting their pension payments. And previous to this bill, it was just spread amongst all the governments in North Carolina that participated in the retirement system. And so this bill was an attempt to really cut back on that, limit it, and to hold the counties where that situation was happening responsible for their employees. So any employee hired before January 1st, 2015 who makes more than $100,000, the retirement system is measuring like their contributions versus their estimated pension payments, things like that. They have this calculation that they do, and they have started sending all the governments in North Carolina like a watch list kind of employees. Like if they retire today, you would have this, like you would have to pay this much. And so we looked at it this year and thought that it was measurable, that there were people on that list that have already either declared a retirement date and things like that. So we used that information to calculate the liability that we thought we would have. Hopefully the people stay long enough to contribute more and things like that, and the calculation changes. So it's not necessarily like a given, like we had a bill for it that's already been paid, but it is a calculation that we do based on information from the retirement system to say, hey, we want to make sure that we're planning to receive these bills if they come.
How many employees would be in that calculation?
20, less than 20.
Yeah, less than 20. So it's based upon, and I think even some of them, if they've not even hit that threshold of 100,000, I think they get you close, you end up on that list. So we get a list, and we just, start going down the list saying, okay, what's the likelihood that this person's going to retire? How many more years do they have? And then just do the calculation based upon the state would do the calculation. I think the way the law is written is the last government agency that employee works with is responsible for that liability. If it's before the date of 2015 and the employee is hired, of course you have to wait till that employee retires, which is in 20 or 30 years. It will be, I think the way that works is either the employer can decide not to pay the full liability, they can push that off onto the employee, or the employee can just take a reduced pension benefit.
Right. It was 17.
All right, anybody else? We don't need to take action on this, we'll vote on it when it comes in final form
Right, yes.
next month.
Yeah, this is, I think this is our third year
Showing the draft.
of the community member.
Which is helpful. It gives us a
It
chance
is.
to get your feedback and find out, what you think. And
Will you send us this, Lisa, when you get it?
I will.
Can't wait.
Spoken like a true CPA.
Just having withdrawals.
I love to get it, because if I'm having trouble going to sleep, pop out the iPad.
Terry,
I'm up.
internal audit update, yep.
Okay, I just wanted to give the committee kind of an update on what's been going on with internal audit since we last met, which hasn't been that long ago, last month, I think. If you were following along, you may note that what you voted on at the last meeting, Larry presented to the county commissioners, and they approved the change to the charter, change to the committee structure, and adopted the COSO framework on behalf of Buncombe County. So now the real work will begin of implementing the COSO framework. I'm in the middle of getting this certification, COSO certification, and then we'll talk about strategy. We have actually an MPA student who works for the county, and for her capstone project, she's going to help design the training for the for COSO. So we get a little extra help there, which is nice. Something else that you may have also noticed in that meeting, there were a lot of changes to the personnel ordinance, and part of that was changes to the whistleblower, no retaliation, and we beefed up the language, the no retaliation policy in the personnel ordinance. So we're also, as part of that, kind of taking a closer look at the hotline, employee protection / whistleblower hotline, internal and external facing. And so we're meeting in a week or two with the third-party administrator who does that hotline for us, and we're just going to talk about, right now we have a phone number. Do we want to add the option for people to go to a website or to email complaints? Just seeing what other services they offer. We're on what they consider to be their legacy platform, so we're going to take a look at their newer offerings and just see, kind of balance out the cost if we think it will add to the service that we're offering the community and the employees. Other things that I have had, which has been really nice, departments reaching out to me for just to kind of consult with them on various changes they may have going on in their department, just to look at controls, the control effects of those changes. Registered deeds, we kind of talked through their cash handling process. If you were following what happened in Wake County, they kind of, let's just talk through and see if there are any holes that we need to plug there.
What did happen in Wake County? Obviously, it must not have been a good thing, but.
No. Their registered deeds have been embezzling money for years.
Yeah. How much
Been
money?
going on.
Do they know even what it is?
Several million,
Yeah,
I
it's,
believe.
I don't think they still know the bottom line yet.
Yeah. And
It's up over the millions though at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And then the tax department has been going through a reorg, so the Jennifer Pike, the person over collection, she's invited me in to kind of talk about some duties she wanted to change between employees, make sure we have proper segregation of duties there. There's a new justice resource program that is being started, and they also wanted to accept cash, so they got with me and with Jennifer to talk about how do we do that properly. There's been some looking at library trust agreements that were in place, so the libraries asked me to come kind of look at those with them. And then the Workday ERP implementation, I'm also part of that. And also the governance team for the Workday, whenever we need to make changes or change security or anything like that. And then IT has reached out and said that they would like to partner with internal audit because they, often get requests for changes to software or give somebody this permission that they haven't had before, and they would just kind of like to include internal audit to make sure our controls are covered there. So that's all been great to have those partnerships kind of coming out of the woodwork to work on. There's been continued policy review, just like with the personnel ordinance, the whistleblower no retaliation I already mentioned. Looking at the procurement card policy and contracts, policies and procedures. So I've been looped in on those too to get to weigh in, which has been nice. The county manager has been great at including me, and now that internal audit is in a position where I can actually assess risk and be involved in things, she's asked me to come to management team meetings and then to her senior leadership team meetings. So that's been nice because it's obviously a lot easier to assess risk if you actually know what's happening and what decisions are being made. So that's been helpful. And then miscellaneous public record requests, audit committee website that we've been, and then working on a little accounts receivable project at the landfill. So that's what's been happening in the last month or so. Going forward, COSO training is high on the priority list. We're trying to figure out maybe how we coordinate with some of the other all-employee touches that we're going to have. You know, we're working on some new budget things, and there'll be some new metrics maybe and things like that. So I think that may be something we can loop in with. There's been some talk of SWOT analysis and risk analysis, so obviously that feeds right into COSO. And then with the Workday ERP implementation, we also have to get out to all employees. So that's another possible way that we can tie it all together for people and let them see how it all builds upon each other and works together. I think it'll stick with them better. And other than that, so.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Terry? I think I need in particular now that we have 2 commissioners on the committee. To me, one thing we need to discuss, and it really ties into this last item on our agenda, but it also ties in just as much to the hotline whistleblower procedures being put in place and so forth. But, and help me if I'm wrong here, but with our new structure, Terry, and where she'd have staff, it's an administrative report to Diane, but the reality is that now this committee has to provide some more ongoing structure and help and oversight for internal audit. Turns into, at this juncture, a big job for this committee. So actually I reached out to Terry the day after the commissioners meeting, and my comment to her was that until the audit committee could meet today, until we could meet again, that she needed to know where to turn if something came up that she needed to talk about in her work, because her role, it doesn't really flow to Diane, it flows to this committee. So my instruction to Terry was that if something came up that she felt like needed immediate attention and she needed to discuss it, to convene the 2 commissioners and the chair of the committee. So that gives us 3. It's not a quorum, and so we can meet at ease, and that's how we would proceed. So that's open for discussion, because we need to make sure, we probably need to get something in our minutes that that's what we're going to do and how we're going to proceed. But it actually is this last item on our agenda, that we have a subcommittee. My suggestion, and I think Terry was concurred with this, that it's essential that we have the 2 commissioners, because it's government, so we want the elected officials, and then the 3rd member,
the chair.
It seems reasonable. Seems reasonable. So it's not only the emergency, sort of situation that might come up, but it's also just ongoing. This committee, I think we probably envision it, although we need to talk about this, but maybe it's at the next meeting, or maybe it's even at the next meeting. I think we thought a quarterly meeting would work for the committee, which we're almost doing that anyway. But in the meantime, I think this subcommittee needs to have a regular meeting with Terry, just to get kind of the report that she has and maybe a little more detail, and as we learn and grow and things move forward, it'll kind of have its way of fleshing its way out, I think. But it could be done, doesn't necessarily need to be a face-to-face meeting, but that's easily done. But we can do it by telephone if we needed to, or whatever. So I laid all that out for discussion, and anybody has any other thoughts about that?
I think what we finally doing, we're going to operate as an audit committee. When I came on several years ago, I had a conversation with the former county manager, because coming from where I did, I've been on several audit committees, and it was strange, it was different. I just thought maybe it was because of the way, governmental bodies, but as I found out, no. But all we're doing now is operating the way we should have been operating all along.
Right.
And that's
Right.
cleaning it up.
Right, right, and to, also just to help, and this helps me some as well, when I joined the committee, whenever it was, I can never quite remember. It was
You were here when I came.
Yeah, you know, there was not we were at a gap between internal, were you the internal auditor before Terry? Was there somebody between you two?
There was a couple.
Couple between, but for there's been a gap in time, we did not have an internal auditor.
Oh, the internal auditor was not meeting with us.
We didn't have one.
We didn't.
Before Terry, there was a gap of 3 or 4 years?
No, it was just about 6 months.
Oh, just 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Well, that's right, then, they never met with us, that's the reason I thought there was
The internal
one.
auditor didn't come.
That's right.
Because I said, no, the internal auditor didn't meet with
Yeah,
us.
So I think, I don't know, did you come on when I was over in IT? So Travis was the audit financial reporting manager, and then Kelly, so there might have been that period of time when you didn't.
I might have hit the 6 month period or something there, whatever,
Right.
a little bit of gap, but whatever, you're right, though, Al, that's exactly the way it should operate.
Right.
Yeah,
There
and
was
so
a-
it's not an unusual thing that we're saying the internal audit has to have somebody to report to. However, even before then, with internal audit, you still reported to management, really, when you
Yes.
were internal audit, and that's just not the way it should be, so I guess I'm not hearing any objection. I think it would be good for us to frame a motion and get it in our minutes that we'll form an internal audit subcommittee consisting of the 2 commissioners appointed to the audit committee and the chair, and they will meet on a regular basis with internal auditor and or staff, and for ongoing supervision of the internal audit process.
And then they will report back to us at our like quarterly.
It would be,
Right.
we get updates at our quarterly meetings and so forth, we sure would. Because we have we have the necessity, whatever it is, and we'd have to work with legal counsel on it, but if it's something that we shouldn't, for some reason, and had justification not to be public,
Yeah, I just wanted to caution that if the 3 of you were to meet with Terry for any reason, you don't want to start sending emails to the whole committee.
Right.
Because then you get sucked into making a
Right.
decision,
Right.
so.
Right, right.
But to report back at the next regular
Right.
meeting.
Right.
Right, if we had something
Then
that
we
was
could go into closed session.
Yeah.
right, right. So that would be kind of the scheme of things and so forth, but we'll negotiate that when we get there. So, is that clear enough for a motion? All right, very good. So I'll offer that out for the board, and we need a motion to do that.
So moved.
Is there a second? You might want to can you go back and read that again? I think all we're saying, I think all we're saying, tell me if it's not consistent with what you have, that we'll have the internal audit subcommittee will consist of the 2 commissioners appointed to the audit committee and the chair of the audit committee, and we'll meet on a regular basis, and I think that's sufficient for the motion, isn't it? Meet on a regular basis for ongoing supervision and oversight of internal audit. That sound good?
Yes.
So we got a motion and a second, I think we did. We did a
Yeah,
second.
you did say.
We did. So any other discussion? And if not, all those in favor, aye. And opposed, no. Deal. Is there any other business that we need to discuss?
All I'd like to say before we adjourn is to thank the staff and the employees for a job well done. I know, as you can see and you've heard today, the county business is going on as usual. They're doing a good job in spite of some other distractions they have that's taking up a lot of time. But, I knew coming in we had good staff, good employees. But boy, I didn't realize how good they are until now. But thank you, we appreciate it. And I think I can say this for all 7 of the commissions, all of us. We appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments?
I actually had a question about the audit process. What kind of audit response did Gould Killian have when the news started coming out back in August and earlier period?
That's probably a question better for them. I mean, we,
But they did ask, you were in contact with them.
Right,
about
so
that
when,
situation.
they were informed early on.
Right,
Once staff was aware of the situation, Terry and I met with,
so they've obviously become comfortable.
yes.
They're planning to issue
Yes.
an unmodified opinion, right?
Yes, they, right, yes, they were brought on, it was July. I think we had conversations with them,
Very early.
I mean, it
yeah.
was, so.
Did they change any of their audit programming and focus any significant way because of the news?
They do a risk assessment every year, and so I'm sure that there was some things that factored into the risk assessment. We didn't see a huge increase in detailed testing
Right.
from other years.
Right. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion we adjourn.
So move.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Great, thank you.
So we'll meet again
So-
latter part of November.
Yeah.
And so, do you